I think we have quite a lot of our participants, and I think we're ready to kick off. Great. Oh gosh, what a terrible photo. Hello everybody, and hello Mark. I see you've just commented. Last one. Danny, you've just commented. Okay, cool. We're going to look into that just now. Everybody, my name is Caitlin Nash. The photo on the screen is probably about 10 years old, but women and everyone is allowed to use photography that makes them look better. I wear a couple of hats in the kind of tech startup space. About 7 or 8 years ago, I co-founded Loudhailer, which is an innovation engagement agency. What does that mean? For about 7 or 8 years, I have helped startups in all different verticals market themselves, scale, and create visibility and build partnerships in South Africa, Africa, and beyond. I'm here predominantly as a facilitator of this call. However, given my marketing experience, I am very happy to jump in and be able to answer some questions about marketing related questions on this call. What we have done is we've invited Reginald Pillay, who is an experienced and very seasoned, I almost want to say expert/executive, who's helped owner-managed businesses grow. And he's done that for almost 20 years. So if you're talking about someone who can help you with business structure and tax and finances and all these things that make doing business in South Africa quite tough, Reg is your guy. And we feel very privileged to have him on the call today. And we are the two people who will predominantly be engaging with you over the next hour or two. Let's just quickly regroup on how this webinar came about. We do have our tech support guru on the call, who's Dylan. So if I refer to an invisible Dylan, he's the guy controlling the slides. I just want to bring everyone to the picture about ScreenTech. So ScreenTech is a very big umbrella phrase that we have used to cluster various verticals within the screen space. It's a project that was started in 2020 by the Department of Economic Development. Essentially, what they identified is that we have a couple of underdeveloped areas within the Cape Town economy predominantly. So I know a lot of you are from Joburg, but what we found during our time engaging with companies that operate in the screen tech sector was that the Joburg Cape Town scene tend to cross over and cross-pollinate and service projects in both areas. So there were a couple of sectors that were part of this Dash Tech project. We had township technologies, there was a fintech screen, a safety tech stream, and then Screen Tech, which encompassed gaming, streaming and production, VR, AR, MR, digital apps, social media, animation and design. So a really, really big term. And the reason it was a big term is that in the first year, we did a lot of exploratory work to try and understand who was in this space, who was operating in this space, and who could benefit the most from support from the city and from various other technology support agencies in the Cape Town region and in South Africa. This is now year 2, where we are implementing a lot of the recommendations that came from that exploratory phase, one of which is the Masterclass today, which there are 2 scenarios that have emerged from the research. The one is quite general across the tech industry and the services industry. Grow, which is the economic development agency in Cape Town, identified that although we perform exceptionally well in terms of exporting our product from South Africa, there is a massive opportunity to grow our services industry and then to export our services. So yesterday, I was very lucky, we had the government of Estonia here, and they spoke extensively about how you can set up an e-residence, you can actually access e-residency from them, meaning that you can set up your company in Estonia and they have a marketplace on which you can market your services. So we are going to look very soon in the near future to do a workshop on that. So please follow us and stay in touch. That is looking at how we can export our services. The second part that we found was a lot of people working specifically in this space are maybe freelancers, maybe have really small studios, like 2, 3, 4 people, are potentially outsourced as part of bigger agencies. And we encountered a lot of questions that people had. Basic business questions: how should they set up their structures? How should they manage their tax? what factors should they consider around funding, how do they plan their growth from a financial point of view, what are HR considerations they should take into account. We really found over the period that we engaged with various clusters that there was a base need to have community dialogues where people could ask questions and access high quality advice at no cost. And that's where this masterclass series came about. So today is probably not going to be able to answer all your questions, but we should be able to make a significant difference to those who are immediately looking to connect on some key issues. We will also be taking note of all your questions and everything you ask, and we will answer those or provide content sessions on those in the follow-on sessions to this masterclass. So questions around IP, questions around the Reserve Bank, question around legal scenarios, whatever it is that you want to question, please keep putting it in the chat and we will tackle what we can today, and we will bring on board other experts to answer those questions going forward. In terms of the project, it was taken over from the Department of Economic Affairs and transferred to the City of Cape Town. So today, the session is brought to you, sponsored by the City of Cape Town in partnership with Silicon Cape and Loudhailer. Loudhailer being an innovation agency and Silicon Cape being a catalyst to tech and innovation in the Cape. For those of you who don't know Silicon Cape, make sure that you get onto their social channels. They have a website as well, and you can sign up to their newsletter. That's where most of the opportunities get advertised to the tech community in the Cape. Right, let's have a look at getting into the actual content. Right, I am going to let Reginald introduce himself, but he is here today, actually also from Joburg. So for our Joburgers, Reg is also a Joburger, and he's representing Ariston Grow, which is a subsector of Ariston Capital that really focuses on helping small to medium businesses become profitable, become sustainable, and achieve their growth targets. Let's have a look at some very boring webinar rules. Please make sure your microphone is off. There will be a time for Q&As a bit later in the session. The chat function is extremely efficient. However, it's also great to hear voices. So when we get to the Q&A session, I will encourage you to raise your hand. And for those who want to pose questions verbally, we will take those. Continue to use the chat as much as you need to. Dylan, our invisible guru, will be collecting all the questions, and we'll run through them near the end of the session. Just to let you know, the session is being recorded. So we always say to people, what happens online it stays online. So please be conscious of that. And we will be sharing the recording afterwards for those who want to re-listen or share it with others. Right, so I am going to hand over to Reginald. And really what we want for this session is Reg is going to take us through some high-level concepts, but really use this time to share his experience and advice around growing small businesses. And we'll do some prompting and some interrogation of your questions after we've given Reginald some time. Okay, Reg, over to you. Please introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. I am very, very grateful to Caitlin and the organizers of this event, of the masterclass, for putting this together. Loudhailer, Silicon Cape, and City of Cape Town. It's a great initiative to put this together. It's something that's lacking. There should be a lot more masterclasses that help entrepreneurs navigate their way in what is a very difficult journey. So I was chatting to Caitlin offline earlier on, and I was saying that South Africa is one of the hardest countries in the world to do business in because of the legislation that governs so many different aspects in which business touches. And you know, entrepreneurs, I know when I first started 15 years ago, when I started what was called Ariston Financial Services back then, it was like a maze that you had to navigate. And I'm very grateful that I managed to meet very intelligent people that gave me a lot of good insight that helped us develop and grow the business we have today. So Invisible Tech Guru, if we can maybe move over to the agenda. So what I'm going to cover today is high level what an entrepreneur needs to look at when starting up a business. When you an entrepreneur and you've got the idea, when that light bulb sparks that there's an idea that you want to now turn into a business, one of the first questions you have to ask yourself is, what type of business ownership do I want? There are multiple types, and so that's a question you have to ask. And I'll take you through the different types, the pros and cons of the different types, and some personal experience there. We then have to look at statutory compliance. So that's basically, in a nutshell, staying out of trouble. SARS is one of the best revenue collectors in the world. So statutory compliance is important, not just from a SARS point of view. We have compliance with regard to Department of Labor, CIPC, and the list goes on. So I take you very high level into what that means. We've got to look at business process, because any successful business needs a process. In my opinion, the two most important processes for a small SME startup business is accounting, because money makes the world go round, and we need to make sure that we have enough of it to make our world, our business go round. And human resources, because every business needs human capital and needs to look after its human capital. Following that, we need strategy and business planning, because if you're on a journey, you need a roadmap, and you need to plan how you're gonna get to your destination. And that's really what strategy and business planning is. And then we end off, we conclude, we get to know a bit about Ariston Grow and what we do, and we move on. So over to business ownership. So in the main, in South Africa, we have 6 different types of business structures for entrepreneurs to consider. They differ in format and in taxation rules. They differ in implication, growth potential, the ownership structure, and they differ in debt management and profit sharing. But largely, for everybody on this call, the type of ownership structure you pick is dependent on your own personal and business strategy need. So the 6 types are a sole proprietor and partnership. I'm going to talk about them together because they are very similar. A sole proprietor and partnership is where the owner or the founder has no differentiation between the business and the individual. The owner and the founder and the business are very much the same thing. It's generally, and some personal insight is, when I started Ariston Financial Services 15 years ago, I started as a sole proprietorship. Today we're a PTY, but I started as a sole proprietorship. It's easy to start. There's no registrations. It's quite easy to get a bank account opened with it. And basically the owner or the partners within the partnership are the business. The difference between a sole proprietorship and a partnership and having a company, and a company has 2 forms. It has a private company, or what's referred to as a proprietary limited company, or a public company. The difference between those two are that a sole proprietorship and a partnership has no legal persona. A company, being either proprietary limited or public or non-profit, has a separate legal persona from that of the owner. They teach us in Commercial Law 101 that a company can sue and be sued. A sole proprietor and a partnership, the sole proprietor or the partner would be sued. And so therefore, it isn't advisable to be a sole proprietor and partnership. It's easy, but it isn't, from a legal standpoint, it's dangerous. It's not tax efficient. You find that most companies in South Africa are PTYs or proprietary limited companies. And so that is where you'll predominantly find SMEs in that sector. There used to be something called closed corporations many years ago, but that's also folded into the PTYs now. They don't do that anymore, and you now have mainly SMEs are PTY companies. You then have non-profit companies. Non-profit companies are exactly what the name defines. It's a company that doesn't seek profit. Those are generally foundation type, charitable organizations, organizations that have a public benefit, organizations that are looking to do work for public benefit, not necessarily to generate a profit for shareholders. And then you have a business or trading trust, and that could vary. There are various examples of trusts, especially where in certain property sectors, you'll find a property holding trust that trades and rents out the property. But those are the 6 different types of business structures that one has to consider in South Africa. In the playbook, we go into much detail as to what each thing is. But when you're starting off, it's a good idea to know where what each legality is, and then you pick that and what you require and fit that need into that strategy into your need. Dylan, next one. Statutory compliance. So once you've decided what you're going to register and what company suits you, you've got to think about your statutory compliance. Now that's registration with SARS, Department of Labor, and so on. Now, there seems to be so many legal requirements in setting up a business that it's hard to know where to start. So this is just an overview. It's not an exhaustive list. It's a basic list of where I think you should start. And it's difficult as an entrepreneur to know whether you're doing what's legally obligated of you. But good practice would have that when you're ready to start your company, and if you've chosen a company, both whether it's non-profit, for public benefit, a listed or a public company or a proprietary limited company, will have to register that with what is known as CIPC, or Companies Intellectual Property Commission. Once we've done that, we register with SARS for payroll taxes, which is really PAYE, UIF, and SDL, and we will then see if we need to register for VAT. If you have staff, you have to register for PAYE, VAT. There's a threshold. If you turn over R1 million a year, it becomes a compulsory requirement. If not, you can voluntarily register for VAT. Income tax, although I have got it here that you have to register with SARS, CIPC and SARS have done a collaboration. So when you register your company at CIPC, you get an income tax number with it. If you employ staff, you have to register with the Department of Labor. COIDA, which is the Commission for the Occupational Injury and Diseases Act, requires that you register for workman's compensation. If you have staff, you have to do it. Remember, when you have staff, you are vicariously liable for your staff, or you are liable for your staff when they are on duty and performing a function for the business. This workman's compensation takes care of that. It's an insurance that's mandatory by the Department of Labor that will look after your staff if they're injured on duty. And then you have to register for UIF. There's a misconception that because you pay UIF through your payroll taxes at SARS, that you don't have to register with the Department of Labor. It's wrong. You do have to register with the Department of Labor. You have to file what's called a UI-19 every month. Most payroll systems do it for you, but you have to comply with that. UIF is a type of insurance that the government collects and then will pay over to staff who are unemployed through retrenchment or that kind of thing, non-voluntary termination of employment. If we move over, then we look at business process. Now, business process is important. You need to know the method and the function of how your activities are structured, and you need to know how you use people and equipment to deliver a desired result or product to a customer. So business process I broke down into 2 different aspects. I broke them down into accounting and human resources. Because any small business, the biggest thing in small business is cash flow. I know my own personal journey has had many times where cash flow is you realize how important cash flow is. It's difficult to run a business without money in the bank. especially when you're in a constant state of trading. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have a good accounting process and we have a good accounting basis to work off. And then we look at and then we can look at the human resource element. But we start by accounting. Dylan. Tech Guru. Next slide. So if we look at the purpose of accounting, what is the purpose of accounting? It's to accumulate and report on financial transactions and events regarding the performance and the financial position and cash flow of a business. Now, I broke this down into different pieces. Monthly management accounts. So what is that? Every business should get a statement of profit and loss. You should know what your turnover is, what the cost of sale to produce that turnover is, what the operating cost to keep the business running is, and what your profit is. That's essentially what a profit and loss is. Every business should have a statement of financial position and a statement of financial position rather, which is a new term. It's commonly referred to as a balance sheet. Everybody still knows it as a balance sheet. Now, what is that? A balance sheet looks at your assets, both non-current and current. Now, non-current assets are assets that you will not liquidate or turn into cash in 12 months. And it'll look at your current assets, which are assets you will liquidate and turn into cash in 12 months or within 12 months. Non-current assets are your cars, your equipment, property. Current assets are things like your bank account, debtors, or clients that owe you money, stock. So you can see the differentiation between the two. With stock and debtors, you'd assume that they would pay and it would realize, you'd either sell the stock or the debtor would pay to realize cash within a 12-month period. Non-current assets being property, vehicles, and equipment, you wouldn't really sell within a 12-month period. It then looks at equity. So it looks at your assets and then it looks at your equity. Equity is any capital contribution that the owner put in. So you as a business owner, you invested into your business, it sits as equity. It also takes a look at all the retained profit. Hopefully that everybody on this call is very profitable businesses. And if you're a startup, I hope that you all become very profitable businesses. And so that retained earnings sits on your equity. It then looks at liabilities. Liabilities, again, are matched very much the same the way your assets are. It looks at non-current liabilities and it looks at current liabilities. Liability, non-current being bonds and cars that you would pay in a period greater than 12 months, and current liabilities being debt or creditors that you'd pay in a shorter period, so less than 12 months. Current liabilities are things like your bank overdraft, certain SARS returns, creditors or suppliers that you owe money to. Your balance sheet runs on an equation, A equals E plus L. Both the assets and the equity and liabilities must balance. It shows that your information is accurate. If you get the equation to balance, which it should always balance, and it gives you a snapshot of almost like the asset position of the business. You then have asset registers, which are important to be kept. You need a list of the register of the assets you have that are owned by the business. I think that it's important to know what that is because it factors into other areas of accounting that that are more high level that we won't get into in the call. You look at your debtors and creditors age or supplier age analysis. Simply put, debtors being everybody that owes you money, suppliers being everybody that you owe money to. It's important to know that it factors your cash flow. It's important to know what your inventory sits at. And all of these things help you devise a cash flow. How much money do I need? When do I need that money? And what position am I in financially? Am I in a cash positive position or not? It is the lifeblood of business, is understanding this very basic, simple concept. It is actually the lifeblood, making sure that this is managed correctly. Because like I said, there are many businesses which are profitable on paper, but don't have a cent in their account. And not being liquid is a huge problem to let business continuity. This monthly management accounts are collected over a period of over 12 months, or depending on what your financial year is, and it's culminated into a set of annual financial statements. Those annual financial statements are a review or a document that tells an investor, a bank, or yourself, mainly the position in which your company is in. Now, together with all of that, you have monthly returns that have to be done to SARS. Now, I can see in some of the chats that are coming up, the word monthly return there is a bit deceptive, especially for the term VAT. There are different categories of VAT. Most businesses, predominantly most SMEs, submit VAT every second month. If your turnover is under 30 million rand a year, and you'll submit VAT every second month. Once your turnover gets past 30 million rand a year, it's a SARS requirement that you submit VAT every month. And it also depends on your sector. If you're in the agricultural sector, certain dispensations were given to certain areas within the agricultural sector where you could submit VAT once every 6 months. But for the purpose of this masterclass, most organizations in this masterclass would submit VAT every second month, and if your turnover is over 30 million every month. You then have to submit a monthly PAYE return, and that PAYE return is a monthly UIF return. Now, these tax types are commonly referred to as custodial taxes, because like with VAT, you charge VAT to your client and you claim VAT back from your supplier. You do a calculation. Most accounting systems will do the calculation for you, and it gives you the net difference, and you pay that difference over to the receiver. The VAT doesn't belong to you. PAYE, or payroll taxes, which encompasses UIF, you deduct off your employees and you pay it over to SARS. Again, doesn't belong to them, to the company. So these are custodial taxes. SARS appoints you to collect on their behalf and pay it to them. You then have annual returns. Now, annual returns predominantly are CIPC. So every year we have to submit to the registrar that the company is still trading, and this is the turnover. And there's a calculation that leads, depending on the turnover, of what the annual return fee is. We have to submit COIDA, like I explained. That's workman's compensation for your staff. And I actually saw on the call now, on the chat, there's a very good question about that. What happens to your staff that work from home? That is a very good question. It actually is. It got me thinking. The person that sent that question threw me off guard as I was reading this, because I saw the question and it was very, very interesting. Anyway, and then you get income tax. Now, income tax, it gets complicated, like with most things tax related in South Africa. Income tax, your assessed tax is submitted once a year, but as a business you pay provisional tax, which is basically an estimation of what your income tax is, and you pay that twice in a year. And then once we do your financials and the financials are drafted, that then culminates into a assessed tax return, or what SARS calls an IT14SB, and that will lead to SARS then knowing how profitable you are. That's where you declare what your taxable income is to SARS. The playbook, or the document that will be circulated after this masterclass, explains that in a bit more detail. It is very technical, but in the main, those are the 3 annual taxes you get. There are different tax, or there's different, when it comes to income tax, there's different tax breaks as well. So if you're a small business, you're not what termed personal service, and your turnover is under 20 million, there's a tax break the receiver gives you that allows you to get a lesser percentage than the 28% company tax, which is soon to be 27% company tax, that's charged to everybody else. But we can go into detail about that later. Moving on. Right, so that was accounting. So we've spoken about the money, and we've spoken about what we need to do in order to make sure that we understand where and what our financial position is in the business. And we've spoken about how we need to account for that and the kind of documentation we need to be able to read and look at the overview of where we're at. Now we need to talk about human resources. Now, human resource is an umbrella term, a term that's used to describe management and development of employees in an organization. It traditionally it focused on hiring and firing. It was an old school and really looked at salary reviews and pay increases. That was the traditional way people viewed human resources. You hire staff, you fire staff, and we basically discuss the pay, the pay increases. But it's gotten a lot wider than that. There's a much greater coverage of what HR is today. Ultimately, it is increasing your employees' performance. Productive and happy staff are productive. I'm sure most people have heard the adage, happy wife, happy life. Well, happy staff are productive staff. And so you need to make sure that you're looking at the staff from in all aspects, developing a positive business culture, creating an employee engagement or improving the engagement within the organization, making them understand that you have a vested interest in their wellness, in their personal development, and all of these things indirectly linked to productivity, because once an employee knows that they're valued, that their personal development and goal is being looked at within the organization, and that they have a place that's going to help them grow, you have productive stuff. So it's almost dealing with the psyche and the mind of an employee and making sure that they stay or that they're engaged. And that's what you want. You want a company full of engaged employees that believe in the common purpose of the business. So if we move on to the next slide, it's detailed in a bit. So HR is very complex. There are many legislative obligations that apply not only to the employer, but also to the employee. And coupled with that, the bigger an organization gets and the more complicated the structures within an organization gets, the more important it is to put together a set of policy and procedures and standard operating procedures. Now, the thing is, why this is important is small business often thinks, I'm too small to put in policy and procedures, and I'm a victim of that. When I first started off, I was a one-man show. I was the policy and I was the procedure. But what you don't realize is as you grow and you add more staff and you add more branches and you add the complexity to business, it's important that there is a set of rules, a set of guidelines that help you navigate and help everybody do what is required of them, because without doing that, you don't realize how you impact the next person's job. So policy and procedures is actually very important. And so in devising a set of standard operating procedures is actually very important. And it is actually a good thing to do now. It is actually a very, very good thing to do when you're small, because it's easy to build on it when you become a large organization than trying to put a set of policy and procedures into a large organization where there isn't any rules of engagement, if I can call it that. So today is the day to start. HR compliance also extends to many issues across the organization. So it looks at recruiting, interviewing, and hiring. We coined the term at Ariston, we call it hire to retire, because we felt that cradle to grave was a bit too crass. So it's hire to retire. So we, and that all follows under the HR banner. It looks at safety and security. People need to feel safe when they're at work. Like I said, it's policy and procedures and employee and personal handbooks or standard operating procedures. HR takes into cognizance the legal legislation and the labor laws that govern those legal legislations that every employer has to follow. South Africa is governed by the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and that's just one of the legislations we have to follow. And HR looks into that and makes sure that the employer is adhering to that. So an organization like Ariston would make sure that you are staying true to the law and not transgressing any laws while you have staff in your employ. It also looks at training and development. You need to continually develop your staff. The world is changing. I mean, I shouldn't have to tell you that. This is a group of people who are changing the world. Tech is growing so fast, you know, so we need to constantly skill our staff into this ever-changing world. And so HR puts together training and development plans. We look at workplace skills plans. There's a whole lot of technical jargon that goes into that, but it's all part of the HR fraternity. We look at sexual harassment, bullying, and drugs. And you think it doesn't exist in companies, but it does. And that falls under employee wellness. Your staff have to feel safe and secure, and they have to feel that the work environment is a safe place. We look at discipline and termination. Unfortunately, not everybody does what is expected, and unfortunately that leads to disciplinary issues. HR takes care of that. It looks at pay and benefits or remuneration and benefit. And then it tries to address conflict resolution and issues surrounding conflict between staff or between staff and the employer. And then it takes care of payroll. Now, payroll is a very contentious one there, because payroll has two forms. It has an HR form because you're paying people, and obviously by paying people, it's human resource related, but it also has an accounting form or a taxation form, because payroll, by definition, there's taxes to be paid in payroll. So the payroll wears two hats, but it is partly governed under human resources. And all of these things, if managed correctly, help the environment function at an optimal level. It helps your employees know where they stand. They know that they have a process to follow if they're not happy. And it gives them, if you do this correctly and you show them the legislation that's being followed, it shows that their best interests are being covered. It is a hugely important aspect in business. As you get staff, again, personally, it was a lot simpler when I had 5 people. Now employing nearly 50 people, you realize the dynamic of managing all these personalities. And what's more difficult is, as your business grows, and I hope that everybody on this call grows, as you start having to deal with your staff that are not in the office that you're in. So like with us, we have offices outside of Johannesburg where I'm based. It's important for those staff to know that they're part of the organization. So our HR department actually has a whole employee engagement process and methodology that we follow to keep all the staff at branches engaged with the organization as a whole. And you'll see as your business develops how important this is. Okay, Tech Guru, moving on. So strategy and planning. Now, why do we need strategy and planning? If you are embarking on a road trip, let's assume you're driving 1,000 kilometers somewhere up the West Coast. You need to know how you're going to get there. You need to know what your destination is, and you're going to need to know what route you're going to take. And devising that is part of your strategy. Working out where you're going to stop, where you're going to have lunch, how you're going to achieve each milestone to get to your destination is part of the plan. And no one's going to embark on a road trip without putting out their plan and their strategy of how they're going to get to their destination. Business is exactly the same. You need to know where you want to go, and you need to work out a plan of how to achieve where you want to go, almost in bite-sized chunks. So I've broken it down into what I believe is 5 simple sets. It's way more advanced than what I'm putting on the screen. But this is a good starting point. So what I have come up with is, I've looked and said, okay, one of the most important parts is the 4 P's. What are the 4 P's? Product, promotion, price, and place. You have to know what you're selling. You have to know how you're going to take it to market. That's the promotion part. You have to know what price to charge. You can't charge too little so that you don't make any money, but you can't charge so much that no one buys the product. And you have to know where to sell it. Where is it wanted the most? Where, if I place my product on what platform, where would that yield me the best result? That's where people like Caitlin and their years of experience help. Then you need to understand your business. You need to assess where your business is today. This includes reviewing the core function and core business information. It means you need to understand your customer. You need to understand your financial documents and position. And you need to revisit your vision, mission, and value statement all the time. I know that this understanding this business component, I think I've revisited that literally 1,000 times in the last 15 years. Because as your business evolves, it changes. It enhances. You get better at understanding where to position yourself. And it does change. You change with the market condition, but you have to understand that. You have to understand where you're going. And so it's very important to do that exercise. It's also important to analyze your business's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is commonly referred to as a SWOT analysis. It's a tool that's critical for evaluating exactly that. What are your company's strengths? What do you do and do really well? What are your weaknesses? So what are the weaknesses that you could improve into a strength? What are the opportunities? And I'm talking about untapped opportunities. What areas of your business that you haven't even looked at that could lead to greater revenue? And what are the threats? Who are the threats? That's another important thing. Who are the threats? And that can be culminated into a SWOT analysis, which then provides insight as to where you should focus your marketing effort. And it gives you a better understanding of your client and industry and a clue of how to keep your competitive advantage. The idea with this is to focus on your strengths, ensure that you can convert your weaknesses into strengths, and optimize those opportunities that you have. But and the last one being threats is never forget the threats. Depending on what they are, we need to work a way on how we manage those threats and how we deal with those threats and how we mitigate those threats. Unfortunately, some threats we're not going to be able to eradicate, but we can mitigate them. And so that's why this analysis is so important. And also, like with everything else in strategy, has to be revisited regularly. You need to set objectives and goals. Drill down into specific objectives that help you achieve your vision. And remember, I said in the second block, understand your business and revisit your vision, mission, and value. You have to have a vision, mission, and value because your staff buy that. What you got to do is create a common purpose, especially as your organization gets bigger. You got to have all your staff and all your resources pulling in the same direction. So you got to set down specific objectives that help you achieve that vision. You've got to, and these might include things, you've got to look at launching new products, trying different marketing strategies. Ask Caitlin about Ariston and how many different marketing strategies we are trying. Reallocating financial resources. That's why finance is so important. The only way we'd be able to reallocate financial resources is if we know what resources we have. And improving employee culture. That's why HR is so important. Because the only way we can improve culture is if we know what culture we have and what element of our employee culture needs improving. So you can see now how all of the different aspects I spoke about earlier on in the slides tie into your objectives and your goals. And then you need to determine the specific requirements to meet the big picture goal. So, but you, again, the play on this, on the word here is goal. You have to have a goal. It helps you stay focused. And then, in my opinion, lastly, put the plan into action. Words mean nothing. Objectives are future focused, and you need short-term action steps to be able to realize those objectives. Unlike goals, task takes only a day or a week to complete. Break those tasks into smaller steps. Ask yourself what needs to happen today before I take the next step. So create the goals and create the objectives, but break them down so that you can achieve those goals and objectives. Break them down into tasks. But you have to put your plan into action. Because if you don't, it's just going to be a plan on a piece of paper. And that's not going to help anybody. So put the plan into action. And I think if you start with these 5 elements, you've come a long way, or there's a long way towards building the strategy. But this is the basis, the foundation, as far as I'm concerned. In the nearly 20 years, geez, I think it is actually 20 years, maybe more than 20 years. In the 20 years, I'm getting old. In the 20 years that I've done this, this is a great part of a great place to start. And so start here. Dylan, moving on. And then ask for help. A lot of businesses find that I think they get the sense that help shows a sign of weakness. Quite the contrary. Help is a sign of strength. Ask for help. Nobody knows everything. I ask for help every day. Large companies with big budgets, have the money to appoint staff with specialist roles. They can hire a marketing director. They can hire a financial director. They can hire analysts and very clever people. Small business can't. They don't have the budget for it. Suppliers are easier to manage than employees. So as a small business, look at partnering with individuals that can help you achieve the goals you want to achieve. You don't call an electrician, and that's what the next point is so important. Select the correct professional. Evaluate your professional. Do a bit of research on them. Find out what have they done? What makes them who they are? Do a bit of research on the person you're dealing with. But select the right professional, because nobody on this call is going to call an electrician to fix a leaking tap. And in the same way, you need to call the right professional for the right purpose. And you will see result, but you have to call the right professional. And an absolute must is stay compliant. Poor admin ruins good business. Trust me, I have worked with thousands of companies over the last 20 years, and I've seen some amazing companies fail dismally because their admin was in ruins. And there's only so much somebody can do to try and pick up the pieces. 10 years of bad admin cannot be resolved in 1 month. So as your journey to entrepreneurship starts, now is the time to make sure that you stay compliant, you've got the right business processes, you've got the right checks and balances, and that your admin, which especially from a financial and compliance point of view, is airtight. It's important. It's very important. And then just who we are. So why do we do what we do? We love business. We think entrepreneurs rock. We're entrepreneurs ourselves. Our purpose is to make business simple for the entrepreneur so that they can focus on their craft while we do the admin stuff. I'm not even gonna, I'm not gonna go into our vision, but I think our mission is very, very apt. Our mission is to enable entrepreneurs to launch and navigate their plans to take over the world. Because all of you want to take over the world. We have to help, we help entrepreneurs turn the blah, blah, blah into ching, ching. I think that's a really apt saying. So essentially, your business needs to have a mission. Why do you do what you do, and what are you trying to, and how are you going to do it? What are you going to do? Why do you do what you do? And it has to have a vision. What do you see yourself becoming? I mean, we see ourselves becoming the preferred enabler of business simplicity and success globally. It's what's called a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. But that's what we want to do. And that's what we aim to do. So you need to have that. This is just a wheel of what we do and all of the things that we do for small business. It can be shared in the playbook, and then you can move over to the next slide. And this is just the locations we're in. Now, talking about this business, Ariston Global, the parent company, started with one office and one employee 15 years ago. Today, it is 5 offices and I don't know how many employees. And the reality is that your business will be exactly the same. It's going to grow so fast that one day you're going to be like me wondering, where the heck did I get you? Have the right tools in place. It's so important. If you take nothing away from this call of this masterclass today, it is make sure, just take away this, make sure you have the right checks and balances in place. You remain compliant, and that you manage your finances well and your people well, and that you have a strategy and a goal and a map to go where you want to go. Take that away from this. That's all I want. Okay.
Thank you so much, Reginald. I really appreciate your time. I can imagine that everybody on this call is at different maturity phases of their business. And obviously it's quite difficult to meet everybody's needs because of the varied stages of where you are in your business. So we're going to go into some questions now, but what I wanted to just flag with you is one of the reasons that we asked Reginald to do this session, and why it is perhaps quite an overview as opposed to specific, is as part of this program, we're offering 50 one-hour consultations with Ariston Grow. They will be given to what is termed qualified businesses. There is an application form that you can fill in, and then the 50 that will most benefit from the support based on where they are in their growth stage will be provided with these one-on-one sessions. So Tech Guru Dylan, can you pop that link to the application form in the chat? And for those who want to have a more detailed conversation specifically around their business relating to HR and finance and tax, please fill in the form. All right, let's have a few quick questions. Reginald, I just want to clarify on the VAT question, monthly VAT versus doing it every 2 months. I know you did answer it, but could you just clarify again in terms of how often do you have to submit your VAT returns?
So starting off with VAT. VAT is, it's only compulsory if your turnover is over R1 million a year. So it then becomes a compulsory requirement that you register. If you're under R1 million a year, you don't have to register. You can register, but voluntarily. Now, so that's the first part. The second part is, if your turnover is under 30 million, you will submit VAT every 2nd month. So you have 6 VAT returns in a 12-month cycle. If your turnover goes over 30 million, SARS requires you to submit VAT every month.
Yes. Yes.
And that's really how it works.
And many of us can't wait to submit VAT every month if that's what the turnover is. Right, let's look at some of the questions. Nicholas asked, what is defined as a small business here? Is it annual revenue or number of employees? What is your definition of a small business that you work on?
It's a very good question. Nicholas, it's an amazing question. I have a client that turns 250 million rand a year, and he considers himself a small business because he's not listed on the stock exchange. I've got another client that turns 15 million a year, and he thinks he's a corporate because he has 5 offices in 5 countries. So it's a very good question. There isn't a real definition, to be honest. I go back to where to during the lockdown period, and SARS gave what they called relief to small business, and it was anybody whose turnover was under 100 million. That's a lot.
Yes.
But there isn't, if you look at different literature, people have different schools of thought on what is a small business.
So Reginald, in terms of the 50 consultations that we'll have, and should they be successful, we'll push to open up more to the community. Am I correct then in understanding that you're not too small or too big to be able to access these consultations?
No.
All right, no. Great. Another question we have, what happens with staff working remotely and at home with regards to the Workmen's Compensation Act?
That is a very, very good question. I said that in the presentation when I saw it pop up. It is a really good question. And you know what? I am brave enough to say I don't know the answer, but I'm going to find out. And Caitlin, if you'd allow me, whoever asked that question, I'm going to pop them. If they can please send their email, or somehow we can get in contact with them, I will get the answer for them today. But it is a great question because it's something that I haven't factored. I would assume, given the fact that you are representing the organization even at home, that you should be covered, because technically you're on duty even while at home.
Yes.
I would assume that you would be covered, but that is my interpretation of that. It is not a legal interpretation, but I will get the people I know at some very well-known law firms who I know. I've got a good colleague that specifically practices employment law, and I'm going to get the answer.
Great, happy. Let's get that answer and we'll circulate to everyone on the call. The next question we have, can directors opt out of UIF for themselves, but allow for staff only to be registered with UIF? And what are the ramifications of doing that?
The UIF is a standard deduction. If you're a director and you're employed, it would be paid off your salary. If you opt not to pay UIF, you'll never be able to claim it.
So would it be correct to say that the directors who don't pay or claim UIF typically wouldn't be drawing a salary? Because anyone who is a salaried employee is expected by government to pay UIF?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, most payroll systems don't give you an option. It'll deduct UIF from you whether you want it or not. I mean, it's a payroll requirement.
Okay, so there's not really a way to get out of UIF if you're a director.
It's 140.
Advise it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then as a trailblazer in medical animations, that is awesome, by the way. Whoever is doing that, please share your website with us. Pricing our products was the most difficult thing to do. I think this is a great point that's raised, and I've actually flagged that we should do a session specifically on how to price your services. Sure. The question here is, we only had international benchmarks and nothing local. I think, Reginald, I'm not sure if you'd even have the answer to this, but when it comes to pricing your products, do you have any advice on how businesses should go about finding out how to do this? So
I can talk about my own experience. We offer a service. So what we do is service orientated, not commodity orientated, which is exactly what the medical animation does. It provides a service. So you get a product at the end, or a deliverable at the end, but you're providing a service essentially. Now, the hardest thing to work out is what does it cost to do that? So what we did in our own business is we reverse engineered how to work the price up. We went and worked out what it cost us to produce a project or an initiative, whatever it is. So I'll go, like if I was that company, I would go and work out what it cost me in time, in equipment, take all of the cost to produce that, work out a margin that you want to make, taking into cognizance what other people in the same industry sort of have as a margin, and you'll end up with a figure. Now, sometimes that figure is so much higher than what the market charges. I know we've had that. And then what I'm going to do is tweak my process. I'm going to try and find a quicker way to produce the same result therefore reducing my cost. So it's almost you're going to reverse engineer this thing when you a business like that, because I know I had that same problem. There isn't a right and wrong answer to it. But if my advice would be reverse engineer it. Before you work out what the cost of the product is, work out what it costs you to produce it. Because you certainly can't charge it for, you can't price it for less than that. Otherwise it's costing you money.
So first establish your break even, and then you can work out your profitability from that. Perhaps I'd ask for everyone listening on the call, we've had pricing come up a few times on our last couple of engagements. If anyone is willing to participate in a pricing survey who is listening on this call, please will you just put a thumbs up in the chat. One of the options we're considering is actually reaching out to everybody and anonymously getting their services and pricing, and then creating an aggregated report that we can then share with everybody. That is something that does seem to be useful. However, you do also have to look at your market that you're marketing in. So whether what your local market is prepared to pay for that service, but then also what you would be able to achieve in international markets. And we're hoping to move this community, with the support of the city and the various partners we're working with, into a space where they're able to export their services and trade in global markets as well, with a local base here. All right, Freddie, you put a good comment here. A solid cost tracking methodology for producing and delivering other services and products is activity-based costing. Yes, I think we can do a special session on costing and pricing. Great. Another question here from Rod. I have registered a company in the UK. Is it a good idea to use in SA?
The UK-based company.
Yeah, Rod, if you are still on the call, I'd be happy to give you some airtime to ask that question yourself and explain some context. Checking if we can see Rod. Okay, I don't see a response yet. Reginald, would you need oh, there we go, Rod, you're there.
If you can get context, yeah, we can maybe answer the question.
Yes. I saw Rod and then he disappeared. Okay, well, let's see if Rod comes back online, because I think we need context to answer that question. Right, Michael, I can relate to what you're saying. There was a very broad overview of HR, but Michael basically said, when it comes to the HR slide, what does having a policy in place mean? A long employment contract, a poster on the wall, a lawyer on retainer, etc., etc.
So we offer a product where we put basic policies in place. It lets an employee know what's a leave policy. So when do you apply? How do you apply? Who do you apply to? What's a disciplinary policy? What's a reimbursement policy? So you look at different aspects within that business, and you can devise what needs to be done. It basically gives you a rules of engagement. When it comes to CapEx, we've got a CapEx policy here. You know, so if you require a laptop in some department in Ariston, what's the process that has to follow? The reason we put the policy in place is so that irrespective of who is doing the job, everybody knows what the process is. It gives you a set of rules that you're able to follow. Different businesses will require different things. But that's judged more on a one-on-one basis. It's not you could put it's not about necessarily putting a lawyer on retainer or that kind of thing. It's about creating those set of, how can I put it, terms of engagement, but in a document.
Yes. And Michael, when I got your comment, you know, this is the first masterclass that we're having in a series of masterclasses, and we started with something really general to see what the interest would be. And I must say we're thrilled to have over 40 people on the call today, and we had 187 people express interest, many who apologized they couldn't make it because of load shedding today. So what we've realized is there is a massive appetite for more specialized sessions on HR, on tax, on pricing, on marketing. I would really encourage that everybody stay in touch with us. We are using this initial conversation to plan out the rest of the sessions, and we can unpack what are the types of policies you would need to have in your organization, and then where could you access templated versions, and at what stage would you need to implement them. So we'd be happy to bring on board an HR partner to chat us through that. Right, Danny, it's very interesting what you said. Yeah, one of the biggest things that we could gain tax-wise is access to the Section 11 research and development tax incentive. As game development is 90% salaries paid for R&D, but so far no game development studio in SA has been successful. That's very interesting. Reginald, I don't know if you specifically know that part of the tax legislation, but I wonder if we also couldn't put that on our list to look into and share more information on.
Yeah, I know that there is this R&D incentive, like almost incentive that's available, but let me do a bit of research as to why. I agree with Danny that it's not very successful. So let me get back to you on maybe what the issues are, then we can see how to make that happen. Yeah.
Happy. Right, then we've got a few other questions that have just come through quickly. Let's have a look here. I see Nicholas has answered this, but there was a question, another question on VAT. International clients in animation do not allow us to charge VAT. As a VAT registered company, invoicing them without VAT be a problem with SARS VAT claims? So I think we've seen this when we do work for international clients and we can't invoice them VAT. Is that going to be a problem with SARS or not?
No, because on your VAT return, it asks you for standard rated sales and zero rated sales. And zero rated sales is anybody that you do work with outside of South Africa. Because our 15% VAT is specific to South Africa. So if you're doing VAT work for someone in Botswana, their VAT rate's different. It's 12%, I think. So you can't charge them your 15. So there's a rule at SARS that if you're dealing with a vendor from outside of South Africa, it's a zero rated sale and you're allowed to zero rate it.
Okay, great. I have a question here, which I think is got to do with remote working. And I'm very sure we can have a session that builds on the HR and culture, and especially culture around remote working. But the question here is, I have a web design company and most of the stuff is done from home with internet and a laptop. How do I apply the business processes with my staff working from home? I don't know, Reg, if there's anything you want to add about policy and remote working. Perhaps you just want to share anecdotally how you as an entrepreneur and a business have adjusted to remote working.
So we predominantly work at the office now, but during March 2020 to about June 2020, we had just about everybody working from home. And we devised, so one of the things, so to the person who asked that question, we put a set of guidelines through, which essentially is policies, where you had to check in at certain times in the day. You had to, we had a manager's huddle at 8 o'clock in the morning every morning. We had staff engagements on virtual platforms at different times in the week. And so, and those were not negotiables. We used, it was very similar to doing it in the office. We just used, instead of seeing each other face to face, we used a virtual mean, a virtual set of circumstances. So essentially it can be done. You have to tailor it for each organization because no two are the same, but we can put a set of processes, yes, policies in place and then make it work for that company. Much like a lot of businesses did during the hard lockdowns.
And I think also to the colleagues who asked that question, I think what we will do is we have two phenomenal leaders in the Western Cape environment that have done great work on remote working, and I'd be very happy to invite them for our next session to talk about that. Right, we have one more question, but before we do, if anyone has topics or discussions or anything they would like to see further addressed or explored further, please drop them into the chat now. Our last question we have is from Irentia. Any advice on where to get more info on retaining creative and intellectual copyright or / property of your creative work when working on commission? Irentia, if you're on the call, also happy for you to add some verbal context if you want to. We've migrated to silent crowds nowadays. Reginald, is that space of creative IP within your domain?
Not really. I mean, the only thing I got really involved with was around the trademarking and copywriting of Ariston's, well, the trademarking of Ariston's logo. But intellectual property is a law on its own. There's some very good thought leaders, people I've engaged with from Adams and firms that specialize in intellectual property. But it's a specialty on its own and not one I claim to know a lot about.
Yeah. Oh, Erentia, sorry, no microphone, no stress. You did a short film for a US company and had no creative say on how your work was used after finishing the project. There we go. Nicholas Hall is exactly the right person to answer this. Nick says he was an IP lawyer in a former life. It all comes down to contract negotiation.
Sure.
Thanks, Nicholas. It's great to have you on the call. I don't know if you want to switch your mic on and add some context to that.
Sure thing. Hi, I'm sorry, it's a bit noisy where I am. I'm fleeing load shedding as well. So there's kind of two aspects to that. So the one is that you would normally manage that that sort of relationship in the contract, and the default position is, even in the Copyright Act here, but certainly in the United States, is that if somebody is commissioning a work by default, they would then own the rights to that work. So it's unlikely that you would ever be able to change that statutory position. You may be able to negotiate for certain leniencies though. Typically the things that you would want to do is you would either look to get a license, a royalty-free perpetual global license to use the work as part of the portfolio. And then the second thing, what you're specifically talking about, how they use the work after the fact, once the work has been commissioned, is what is called moral rights. And again, it's something that you're going to have to negotiate with specifically, but typically in your contract, see that your moral rights will either be waived or they won't. If you can negotiate your contract in such a way that you keep your moral rights, then that allows you as the original author, even if you aren't the owner of the intellectual property, to have some say in how it's used. And that's kind of what you would do. But it's not a very powerful right, but it does give you a right kind of objection, and may give you access to kind of like litigation to kind of stop it being used if it's being used in a context that you don't want. But it's not very often invoked, and it does require actually go to court to enforce those rights. But it all comes down to whatever you can get into your contract, and so you need to be quite aggressive in your contract negotiation process. And I think this is something that a lot of people, and certainly back in my time when I was a lawyer, this is something that a lot of people don't do. Is they just assume that, well, I'm dealing with this big company, there's no way they're going to negotiate with me. But you'd be surprised. Always push back on clauses that you don't understand, or you would want to negotiate a better deal with. And you'd be surprised at how often you can kind of change the terms of those deals. It's always worth asking, because the worst they can say is no, and you have already lost it. So.
Yeah, I think, Nicholas, that's a really good point. And I'll tell you, we've got a team of people on the call here, and I wonder if contracts and negotiations is also a topic that we need to really specialize in. We're back to that again, Reg. On your invoices, what do you select under VAT during the period you're not charging for VAT? Is it out of scope? I can't see. Yeah, it's on the chat here. I'm not sure who's asked this question. For some bizarre reason, everybody is labeled Colette on my participants channel. But whoever asked this question about the VAT, if you'd like to actually ask and explain what you're asking, I'm sure Reginald will be able to advise better. See if we get a response here. I'm wondering, Reginald, I don't see anyone switching their mic on, but it looks like the question might be...
Which is I asked the question.
Yeah.
Apparently Colette asked the question, because I also see that.
Yes. But it may be that if you're not charging VAT, then what do you select under your invoices? But I would imagine if you're not VAT registered, then you won't be charging VAT, and then you shouldn't have VAT in your invoices.
No, yeah. If you're not charging VAT, then don't put VAT in your invoice.
Yeah. Perfect.
Read the question again, Caitlin.
On your invoices, what do you select under VAT during the period you're not charging for VAT? Is it out of scope?
Yeah, okay. So it sounds to me that the question means that before you VAT registered, what do you put? You just put nothing. You don't put VAT. VAT is zero because you're not registered.
Okay, Nokalungu, I see that was you that asked and you also can't access your mic. That's no problem. I hope that answered your question. If you're not VAT registered, you shouldn't be charging VAT. And if you have any follow-up questions, we can also respond to you individually.
Yeah.
Irentia, I would encourage you to connect with Nicholas Hall if you want to. Not that I want to promote one person over the other, but Nicholas is certainly a leader in his field for anybody who is wanting to chat to him, and he has popped his email in the chat. Right, somebody has added, yeah, yes, let us add contracts and negotiations to the next session, especially with streamers and investors. Are there any entertainment lawyers in South Africa? Nicholas answers him, yes, he's one of the top lawyers on entertainment in South Africa. We will chat to Nick afterwards. Right, Ian, I see you've also put a topic, how to take your service and product to market successfully. I think market access is a massive conversation that we'll also add on to the next session. Right, I have also just popped in Dylan, who is our tech guru behind the scenes. He's a lot more than that. He's a phenomenal coordinator in the space around these tech projects that we do. For anyone who wants to ask questions, come up with extra topics, perhaps offer their expertise and services to this program, please be sure to email us and we'll incorporate you in the upcoming sessions. For those who just want to stay informed and updated, please make sure that you also send us your email addresses and we will invite you to the next session. For those who are wanting to take Reginald and his team up on their free 1-hour consultations, I would strongly encourage you to do that. Everyone who, oh, I see Reginald, you've been very, very generous. I see there is it's kind of like a chance to win an Ariston Grow starter pack valued at 152,000 Rand. So fill in the application form, stand the chance to get a free consultation, and on top of that, we're going to select somebody who takes on the starter pack with Ariston Grow. And then we're hoping to use that as a case study to show that when we bring on board professional services, we can help grow our innovators and service providers in the ScreenTech space. And then we're planning to use that case study to motivate for a lot more funding. Right. Okay, that's a big thank you from our side. These sessions are never perfect, and they are always an ongoing dialogue and conversation. We are seeking to connect people, connect community members with each other, connect people with professionals, answer questions, and really use this as an active community that we can channel knowledge and information into. Please, the more you engage, the more you share with us, the more you ask, the more we can reach out throughout this project network and facilitate the growth of your business. Right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for participating. Please stay in touch. Reginald, a big thank you to Ariston Grow and to your business for offering your time to this project. It's actually a significant contribution and we really appreciate it. And we'll be sure to share the results with the broader community over time. Right. I think let us wrap up for the day. We have 5 minutes back. And we will be sure to stay in touch about all the upcoming topics, looking at HR, remote working, contract negotiation, marketing, market access. There's clearly a big appetite, and helping 50 to 100 businesses grow, not only in the Western Cape, but in South Africa in the ScreenTech space, is certainly a vision that we think is completely achievable. Right, a big thank you to everybody. Keep well.
Thank you.